Pam Bondi sat in the courtroom, her expression calm but unwavering. She had faced legal battles before, countless in fact, but today was different. Today, she wasn't arguing on behalf of a client or a political cause. Today, she was the defendant. The charge? Wearing a small gold cross necklace while addressing the court. The judge, a staunch advocate for strict courtroom decorum, had ruled that religious symbols worn by attorneys while presenting cases violated the principle of neutrality in the legal system, and so, without much deliberation, he issued a fine against Bondi, citing what he deemed an improper display of religious affiliation in a legal setting. Most would have been caught off guard, maybe even shaken, but not Pam Bondi. She simply tilted her head slightly, assessing the situation with the keen mind that had earned her a reputation as a formidable legal force. Then, with the confidence of someone who knew the law inside and out, she stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "I appreciate the importance of maintaining neutrality in the courtroom, but I must respectfully challenge your ruling on constitutional grounds." The judge leaned back, intrigued but unmoved. "Ms. Bondi, the court has already made its decision. Personal religious expressions should not interfere with legal proceedings." Pam nodded as if she understood his position completely, but then she delivered her first counterpoint. "Your Honor, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution explicitly protects both freedom of speech and freedom of religion. This includes the right to express one's faith through personal attire, as long as it does not disrupt proceedings." The courtroom was silent. Spectators leaned forward. Even the opposing counsel looked curious. "Furthermore," she continued, "the Supreme Court has consistently ruled in favor of religious expression in public spaces, provided it does not infringe upon the rights of others or disrupt government functions. There is no precedent supporting a ban on religious symbols worn by legal representatives in court." The judge folded his hands. "Ms. Bondi, I respect your expertise, but courtroom rules are not the same as general public spaces. Attorneys, like judges, must adhere to strict guidelines regarding professional appearance and conduct." Pam Bondi nodded again, but was already prepared with another response. "That is true, Your Honor. However, the American Bar Association does not have any regulation prohibiting religious symbols in the courtroom. In fact, federal courts have upheld the rights of individuals to wear religious attire, including judges themselves. If a judge can wear a yarmulke or a hijab while presiding over a case, then an attorney must also have the right to wear a cross, necklace without facing penalty." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. The judge, now visibly more cautious, took a deep breath. "Ms. Bondi, you are making a compelling argument, but this is not a First Amendment case. This is about maintaining decorum and impartiality in my courtroom." Pam let a small smile play at the corner of her lips. "Respectfully, Your Honor, this is absolutely a First Amendment case. The Supreme Court has ruled that the government, including its courts, cannot single out religious expression for punishment unless it serves a compelling state interest. What compelling interest is being served by preventing me from wearing a cross necklace?" Silence. The judge looked down, flipping through his notes, but there was no case law supporting his position, no precedent that allowed him to fine her for this, and he knew it. Pam Bondi had him backed into a legal corner. He sighed and leaned forward. "Ms. Bondi, I will review this matter further before making a final decision." Pam nodded respectfully and took her seat. The spectators exchanged glances, knowing they had just witnessed a masterclass in legal argument. Days later, the judge reconvened the courtroom. He cleared his throat before speaking. "After further legal review, I find that Ms. Bondi's right. To wear her cross necklace falls within her First Amendment protections. The fine is rescinded, and this court will take no further action on the matter." Pam Bondi, as always, remained composed. She simply gave a small nod. But those who knew her understood. She had won not just the case, but a battle for constitutional rights. As the judge's words settled over the courtroom, a quiet realization dawned on everyone present. This wasn't just about a fine. This wasn't just about a cross. It was about something much bigger, the fundamental rights that define the American legal system. Pam Bondi had walked into that courtroom as a defendant, but she was leaving it as a defender of constitutional liberties, a reminder that the law is not simply about rules and regulations, it is about justice. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse, eager to hear her response. Cameras flashed. As she stepped forward, her gold cross still resting just above her collarbone, exactly where it had been the day she was fined. "Ms. Bondi," one reporter called out, "what does this ruling mean for attorneys and courtroom decorum moving forward?" Pam met the journalist's gaze and spoke with the same confidence she had displayed in the courtroom. "This ruling reaffirms that personal religious expression is not incompatible with professional conduct. The law does not require us to strip away our personal beliefs to participate in the legal system. It protects those beliefs." Another reporter pushed forward. "Some argue that religious symbols could influence the perception of neutrality in a legal setting. How do you respond to that?" Pam took a breath, steady and thoughtful. "I respect that perspective, but neutrality does not mean the absence of personal identity. It means fair treatment under the law. If a judge can be trusted to rule impartially while wearing a religious symbol, then an attorney can be trusted to argue a case while doing the same. The law must be applied equally to everyone, regardless of faith." The crowd murmured in agreement. Her words resonated far beyond the case at hand. As she turned to leave, another voice called out, "Ms. Bondi, what would you say to those who believe religion has no place in the courtroom?" She paused, then turned back, her expression unwavering. The courtroom exists to uphold justice, and justice is built on the principle of rights, one of which is religious freedom. We don't get to pick and choose which rights are convenient at any given moment. We defend them all, or we risk losing them all. With that, she stepped into her car, leaving behind a debate that would echo far beyond the courthouse steps. Legal. Scholars took notice. Some agreed with the ruling, others challenged it, but none could deny the brilliance with which Pam Bondi had dismantled the argument against her. Law students across the country analyzed the case, seeing it as a real-world lesson in constitutional law. In the days that followed, legal commentators dissected the case on television and online. Some praised Bondi for standing her ground, while others worried about the broader implications. But regardless of opinion, one fact remained. She had forced a conversation about the intersection of faith and law in a way that could not be ignored. For Pam Bondi, this was not just about a single victory. It was a demonstration of what she had always believed. The law is a shield, not a weapon. And when used correctly, it protects everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs. As the news cycle moved on, Pam Bondi continued her work, unshaken and unbothered. She had faced countless battles before, and there would be more ahead. But one thing was clear. She would always be ready. Months after the courtroom showdown, Pam Bondi's case became a landmark discussion in legal circles, prompting debates across law schools, media outlets, and even within judicial committees. The question was no longer about just one attorney's right to wear a cross. It was about the broader implications for religious expression in professional settings. Some judges began reviewing their own courtroom policies, reassessing whether personal religious symbols should be restricted. Others doubled down, arguing that any visible religious expression could compromise the perception of impartiality. But what they couldn't ignore was how Bondi had masterfully used the law itself to challenge the system. In a televised debate, a prominent legal analyst summed it up best. Pam Bondi didn't just win her case, she forced the legal community to confront an uncomfortable truth. If we start regulating personal religious symbols, where do we draw the line? Do we ban crosses but allow Star of David necklaces? What about a judge wearing an ash mark on Ash Wednesday? These are questions the courts will now have to answer. Meanwhile, Law students across the country were dissecting the case. Professors used it as an example of constitutional defense in action. One student at Harvard Law remarked in an interview, "We spend years studying legal theory, but what Bondi did was pure execution. She didn't just cite precedent, she anticipated every counter-argument, dismantled it, and left the court with no choice but to rule in her favor. It was a masterclass in advocacy." But for Pam Bondi, the victory wasn't about personal recognition. It was about ensuring that no one else, whether an attorney, a judge, or an ordinary citizen, would be penalized for their faith. One evening, she received an email from a young public defender in Texas. "Ms. Bondi, I wanted to thank you. I wear a small crosspin every day in court, and after your case, my judge, who had once asked me to remove it, told me he reconsidered his stance. He said he realized that neutrality isn't about erasing identity, but about treating all identities equally. I just wanted you to know that your fight wasn't just about you, it was about all of us." Pam smiled as she read the message. That was why she fought. Not for headlines, not for political points, but for real people who deserve to be treated fairly under the law. But she knew the battle wasn't over. In Washington, whispers had already begun about new legal challenges, cases that would test the limits of religious freedom in professional environments. Some saw her victory as a dangerous precedent, while others saw it as a necessary protection of constitutional rights. One thing was certain. Pam Bondi had made her mark. And if the law came calling again, she would be ready, armed with the same mastery and unwavering conviction that had carried her through every legal battle before. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't just about a cross. It was about the Constitution. And Pam Bondi knew the Constitution better than most. Pam Bondi's case was more than just a courtroom victory. It was a defining moment in the ongoing debate about faith, law, and personal freedoms in America. What started as a simple fine for wearing a cross turned into a national conversation about constitutional rights and the role of personal beliefs in professional spaces. But at its core, this case wasn't about a piece of jewelry, or even about one attorney's personal expression. It was about something much bigger. The idea that religious freedom is not a privilege granted by the state, but a right protected by the Constitution. Bondi's ability to turn the case in her favor wasn't just a stroke of luck. It was the result of years of legal expertise, a deep understanding of constitutional law, and an unwavering commitment to justice. She didn't simply argue that she had the right to wear a cross. She demonstrated that the law was on her side, forcing the judge to recognize the flaw in his own ruling. That level of legal mastery is rare, and it's what sets great attorneys apart from the rest. But beyond the legal victory, the implications of this case were profound. It sent a message to legal professionals across the country that they did not have to choose between their faith and their profession. It reminded judges and lawmakers that neutrality in the legal system does not mean the erasure of personal identity. It means fair and equal treatment under the law. It forced society to confront an important question. Where do we draw the line between professionalism and personal rights? And more importantly, who gets to decide? For some, this case was a warning, a sign that religious expression in public life could be on the rise, challenging long-standing notions of secularism in professional settings. But for many others, it was a victory for personal liberty, proving that constitutional rights remain strong even when challenged by authority. Pam Bondi didn't just walk out of that courtroom with a rescinded fine. She walked out having reshaped the conversation around religious freedom in legal settings. Her case will be studied, debated, and cited in future courtrooms, not just because of its outcome, but because of the questions it raised. And if history has taught us anything, it's that battles over constitutional rights are never truly over. There will always be new challenges, new legal interpretations, and new debates over the limits of personal freedoms. But one thing remains certain. The law, when wielded correctly, has the power to protect those freedoms. Pam Bondi's victory was not just a personal win. It was a reminder that legal mastery, when used for the right cause, can make an impact far beyond a single courtroom. She stood her ground, used the very legal system that sought to penalize her, and turned it into her greatest weapon. And in doing so, she didn't just defend her own rights, she defended the rights of countless others who might one day face the same challenge. Because in the end, this wasn't just about her. It was about all of us.